recognize the gentleman from Nebraska, Mr. Flood.
Thank you to the very capable chairman from Wisconsin. Mr. Chopra, I'd like to focus on the CFPB's recent rulemaking for larger participants in the market of digital consumer payments. This rulemaking covers a lot of ground, from third-party platforms used in small businesses across the country to digital asset wallets. Let's start with the implications for digital assets. When describing the supervisory authority that the Bureau's larger participant rulemaking would give to the CFPB, there is a footnote explaining, and it says, quote, "The CFPB's supervisory authority is not limited to the products or services that qualified the person for supervision, but also includes other activities," end quote. In my view, this footnote signals that the rulemaking will cover far more than the, quote, "general use digital consumer payment applications," end quote. Can you comment on the CFPB's intentions surrounding the scope of this rulemaking?
So I wouldn't misread that. We are looking to make sure there's a level playing field between the banks and credit unions that offer these services and the large non-banks. We already have enforcement authority over all of these entities that would be covered. It wouldn't create any kind of new jurisdiction, but what we're doing is going through the rulemaking process to establish for certain larger participants, are they following the law, existing law? We could go through that process by, an enforcement investigation. That's more adversarial. I think this is a little bit more of a way to make sure that there are not harms, given some of them really are touching tens of millions of customers. But I think I hear the concern, which is kind of going outside of the jurisdiction, but we can only supervise and enforce the laws that Congress has specifically designated for.
Well, given that the rule does not cover some digital asset transactions, like an investor purchasing Bitcoin through a brokerage account, but does cover others, how would the CFPB distinguish between the different types of transactions conducted by the same digital asset wallet?
Yeah, so we're going to have to deal with that. I think most of what we're going to be doing is focused on ones where it's really consumer payments. I think we're trying, if in as much that they're doing two different activities, we have a lot of familiarity how to do this. Many of our banks, they have broker-dealers affiliated with them. They have commercial businesses that we don't cover. So when we do an examination, we explain we're covering the activities under federal consumer financial protection.
So do you think the CFPB has Regulation E authority over transactions using a digital asset like a stablecoin to purchase a consumer good or service?
Well, so part of it, the Electronic Fund Transfer Act covers the transfer of funds. There's certain exceptions for when it is for trading of securities. I think there's other exceptions there. Overall, when you have a consumer payment for household use, I think the case law would suggest that is covered, but we're collecting comment on this just to make sure, and we've been pretty judicious on this point. I've raised with Chairman McHenry and others that, in as much that you all enact anything, we will need to make sure that it is well reflected.
I'd like to quickly switch gears and discuss some of the non-digital asset implications of the rule. Given that third-party payment processing tools are popular among small businesses, how can you be sure that this rule wouldn't result in some of the cost of compliance being passed down to these small businesses?
Well, the rule proposes only for larger participants. So we proposed a threshold for which we're getting comment on. So it's really not supposed to implicate small businesses. And it's really focused on those consumer payments. So I will keep my eye out for that. But again, there's not any kind of new authority. We currently have enforcement and other authorities over these firms already.
I appreciate that. The cost-benefit analysis in this rule states that the Bureau lacks sufficient information to predict how compliance costs would be, quote, borne by providers or passed on to the consumers, end quote. However, you certified that the proposed rule would not have significant impacts on small entities, and therefore the rule wouldn't need to go through the small business panel process. So we've got 20 seconds left. Real quickly, how can you assert the rule will not have an effect on small businesses if the analysis fails to even attempt to weigh the rule's compliance costs?
I think the proposal exempts small business.
Okay. I will look at that. Thank you, Mr.
I
Chairman.
think, and I'll let you know if it's something different.
Thank you.
Gentleman yields back.